Life has a way of bringing strangers together through unexpected circumstances. When Ryan Miller opened his modest home to shelter Sarah Jackson and her children from the bitter winter cold, he had no idea that their chance encounter would change all their lives forever. What began as an act of kindness from one struggling parent to another would unravel into a story of hidden fortunes, deception, and a shocking revelation in court that no one saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The December wind howled through the streets of Mapleton, a small town nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Ryan Miller pulled his worn jacket tighter around his broad shoulders as he hurried from his pickup truck toward the hardware store. At 36, the lines on his face told the story of years filled with both joy and hardship. His calloused hands were testament to the countless hours he spent working as a contractor, trying to make ends meet while raising his 10-year-old son, Dylan, alone. The bell above the door jingled as Ryan entered Henderson's Hardware, the warm air inside a welcome relief from the biting cold. "Morning, Bill," Ryan called out to the gray-haired owner who was arranging a display of snow shovels. "Got those pipe fittings I ordered?" Bill Henderson looked up and smiled. "Just came in yesterday, Ryan. They're behind the counter." The older man studied Ryan's tired face. "You look beat. Taking on too many jobs again?" Ryan shrugged. "Can't afford to turn down work. Dylan's growing like a weed, and you know how expensive kids' winter clothes can be." He didn't mention the stack of medical bills that still haunted him after his wife Lisa's long battle with cancer 3 years ago. The community had rallied around them during her illness, but the financial wounds remained deep. As Bill rang up his purchase, Ryan's phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Lawson, his elderly neighbor who looked after Dylan after school. "Ryan, Dylan's running. A fever. Nothing serious, but you might want to pick him up early." 15 minutes later, Ryan was steering his truck toward home, his sick son dozing in the passenger seat. As they turned onto Cedar Lane, the snow began to fall heavily, coating the road in a slippery white blanket. Ryan slowed down, peering through the windshield, and that's when he saw them. A woman and 2 children huddled at the bus stop, their thin jackets providing little protection against the elements. The woman was trying to shield the children with her body, her dark hair whipping in the wind. Something about her desperate stance made Ryan pull over. "The next bus isn't for 2 hours, he called through his lowered window. "You folks need a ride somewhere." The woman looked up, revealing a face that might have been beautiful, if not marked by exhaustion and worry. She hesitated, eyeing Ryan and his truck warily. "We're fine," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. But the violent shivering of the small boy beside her told a different story. "Look, I live just down the road," Ryan said, pointing toward his modest 2-story house. "At least come warm up until the bus arrives. My son's sick, and I need to get him inside." Something in his mention of his own child seemed to ease her suspicion. After a moment's consideration, she nodded, gathering the children close as they made their way to the truck. The ride was silent except for the squeak of windshield wipers battling the increasing snowfall. When they arrived at Ryan's house, he quickly got Dylan settled on the living room couch with a thermometer and children's Tylenol. "I'm Ryan Miller," he said, finally turning to the strangers standing awkwardly by the front door. "And that's my son, Dylan." "Sarah Jackson," the woman replied. Her voice had a quiet dignity despite her disheveled appearance. "These are my children, Emma and Liam." Then Emma, who looked about 12, had her mother's same dark eyes and solemn expression. 8-year-old Liam stared around the unfamiliar house with unconcealed curiosity. "The kitchen's through there," Ryan said, gesturing. "Help yourselves to hot chocolate while I check on Dylan." When he returned, he found Sarah at the stove, having taken the initiative to prepare the hot drinks. Her movements were efficient despite her obvious fatigue. "You didn't have to do that," Ryan said. Sarah gave a small shrug. "It's the least I can do. Thank you for bringing us out of the cold." There was something in her voice, a carefully maintained composure that seemed at odds with her circumstances. As the children sipped their hot chocolate, Ryan noticed Liam's shoes, worn nearly through at the soles, and Emma's coat with its frayed cuffs and missing buttons. They sat close to their mother, as if drawing strength from her presence. "The storm's getting worse," Ryan said, glancing out the window at the thickening snow. "Where were you headed?" Sarah hesitated. "The women's shelter in Riverdale. They said they might have space for us tonight." "Riverdale? That's 30 miles. From here," Ryan frowned, "the buses might stop running altogether in this weather." A flash of desperation crossed Sarah's face before she masked it. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Emma spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "Mom, I told you we should have stayed in the library until closing time." Ryan pieced together their situation quickly. The worn clothes, the lack of transportation, the uncertain plan for shelter, and made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "I have a guest. Room upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." "We couldn't impose," Sarah said immediately. "It's not an imposition. It's common sense," Ryan replied. "No one should be out in this weather, especially not kids." After some gentle persuasion and practical reasoning about the dangerous road conditions, Sarah reluctantly agreed. As Ryan showed them to the guest room, he noticed Sarah clutching a worn backpack tightly, as if it contained everything valuable in her world. That evening, after getting Dylan's fever under control, Ryan prepared a simple dinner of spaghetti and garlic bread. The children ate ravenously, though Sarah took only small, measured bites, as if conscious of taking too much. Over dinner, Ryan learned bits of their story. Sarah had been a nurse's aide in Portland, Oregon. After her husband Michael's unexpected death from a heart attack 18 months earlier, she'd struggled to maintain their apartment on her salary alone. A series of unfortunate events, hospital bills, a car accident, and finally the loss of her job when the clinic where she worked closed down, had sent them into a downward spiral that ended with eviction 3 weeks ago. "We stayed with a friend. For a while," Sarah explained, her eyes fixed on her plate. "But her landlord found out and threatened to evict her too. We've been moving between shelters since then, trying to save enough for an apartment deposit." What she didn't share, but Ryan could see in the protective way she watched her children, was the toll this instability had taken on all of them. Emma had the hypervigilant look of a child forced to grow up too quickly. Liam's occasional nervous glances toward the door suggested he half expected to be told to leave at any moment. "What brought you to Mapleton?" Ryan asked. A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "I heard there were decent-paying jobs at the new medical center, but when I got here, they said all positions were filled." She straightened her shoulders slightly. "We'll move on to Riverdale tomorrow. I appreciate the shelter tonight." After dinner, Ryan noticed Dylan and Liam sitting together on the living room floor, Dylan showing off his collection of Hot Wheels cars. Despite his lingering fever, Dylan seemed energized by the company, explaining each car's special features, while Liam listened with rapt attention. "This one's my favorite," Dylan said, holding up a red Mustang. "My mom gave it to me before she went to heaven." Liam nodded solemnly. "My dad's in heaven too." The simple exchange between the boys, recognizing their shared loss, stirred something in Ryan. He'd been so focused on surviving day to day after Lisa's death, working every available hour to keep their heads above water, that Dylan had been missing the companionship of other children. The house, which usually felt hollow and too quiet, now hummed with the simple energy of kids being kids. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ryan sat at his kitchen table balancing his checkbook. The numbers were discouraging. Between Dylan's medical expenses and the necessary repairs on their aging house, his savings had dwindled to almost nothing. The construction business slowed considerably during winter months, and he was looking at lean weeks ahead. Yet as he passed the guest room on his way to bed and heard the soft, rhythmic breathing of Sarah and her children, he felt an unexpected sense of purpose. There was something about Sarah's quiet determination, her dignity in the face of circumstances that would break many people, that resonated with him. The next morning, Ryan woke early to find Sarah already in the kitchen, washing the dishes from the night before. Outside, the snow had piled high, transforming the landscape into a white blanket that glittered under the morning sun. "The roads are still pretty bad," Ryan said, pouring himself a cup of coffee, "and they're saying more snow is coming tonight." Sarah looked out the window, her face a mask of controlled worry. "We should try to catch the noon bus to Riverdale. I don't want to overstay our welcome." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're not," Ryan assured her. He hesitated, then added, "In fact, if you're willing, I could use some help around here. Dylan's still running a fever, and I've got a job I can't postpone. Maybe you could stay another day or two. I'd pay you, of course." It wasn't entirely true. The job could have been rescheduled, but Ryan had seen something the previous evening that troubled him. As Sarah had helped Emma get ready for bed, her sleeve had ridden up, revealing angry bruises on her forearm in the distinct pattern of fingerprints. She'd quickly pulled the sleeve down, but not before Ryan had noticed. Whatever Sarah was running from, it was more than just financial hardship. Sarah started to refuse, but Emma spoke up from the doorway. "Mom, please, just for a little while. Dylan said he'd show me his books." Sarah's expression softened as she looked at her daughter. Emma had always been a voracious reader, devouring any book she could get her hands on. The local libraries had been their refuge in recent weeks, providing warmth and escape from their harsh reality. "All right," Sarah finally agreed, "but just until the road's clear, and I insist on earning our keep." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Ryan went to work while Sarah looked after the 3 children. He returned each evening to find his house tidier than it had been in years, with delicious meals prepared from the simple ingredients in his pantry. Sarah, it turned out, could work culinary magic with even the most basic provisions. Dylan's fever subsided, and he and Liam became inseparable, building elaborate forts in the living room and staging Hot Wheels races down the hallway. Emma, initially more reserved, gradually relaxed enough to share her passion for astronomy with Ryan, pointing out constellations from his back porch on clear evenings. On the 4th day, when the roads had finally been cleared, Ryan found himself inventing reasons why they should stay just a little longer. The truth was, his empty house had become a home again. The sound of children's laughter filled the rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Sarah, however, maintained a careful distance. She was unfailingly grateful and contributed far more than she took, but Ryan sensed she was afraid to let down her guard completely. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, he caught her staring out the window with an expression of deep worry. A week into their stay, Ryan made a proposal over dinner. "The school district's looking for a lunch aide. At Dylan's elementary school, it's only part-time, but it might be a start. I mentioned your name to the principal." Sarah looked up sharply. "You did what?" "I'm sorry, I should have asked first." Ryan backpedaled, surprised by her reaction. "I just thought—" "No, I appreciate it," Sarah interrupted, her expression softening. "It's just—" She glanced at her children. "We weren't planning to stay in Mapleton." "Why not?" Ryan asked. "The kids seem to be getting along well." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Starting over isn't easy, especially when you have nothing." "You have more than you think." Ryan said quietly. "You have two amazing kids. You have skills. And now you have a friend who wants to help." That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah finally shared more of her story. Her late husband, Michael, had worked for Blackwood Investments, a financial firm in Portland. After his death, she'd discovered some troubling discrepancies in their finances. Michael kept saying he was putting money away for the kids' college. "Fund," Sarah explained, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. "But when I went to access it after he died, there was nothing there. And then strange men started showing up at our apartment, asking about files Michael might have kept." "What kind of files?" Ryan asked. "I don't know exactly," Sarah admitted, "but whatever it was, it scared them enough that they made threats. When our apartment was broken into, I knew we had to leave. We've been moving ever since, never staying. In one place long enough for them to find us." Ryan absorbed this information with growing concern. "Have you gone to the police?" Sarah gave a hollow laugh. "With what evidence? All I have is a flash drive Michael gave me the day before he died. He said it was insurance, but it's encrypted, and I haven't been able to access it." She pulled the worn backpack closer. "Without proof, I'm just a paranoid widow making accusations against a powerful company." Ryan wanted to press for more details, but he could see the toll the conversation was taking on Sarah. Her shoulders had begun to tremble slightly, the composed facade cracking to reveal the scared woman beneath. "You're safe here," he said simply, "for as long as you need." The next day, Sarah went to interview for the lunch aide position. She returned with cautious optimism. The principal had seemed impressed by her background in healthcare, which included food safety training. The job would allow her to be on the same schedule as the children and would provide a small but steady income. 2 weeks after the snowy night when Ryan had first spotted them at the bus stop, Sarah signed a 6-month lease on a small apartment 3 blocks from Ryan's house. The rent was reasonable by Mapleton standards, and Ryan had vouched for her with the landlord, an old school friend of his. "I can't thank you enough," Sarah said as Ryan helped move the few belongings they had accumulated, donated clothes from Ryan's church, books from the school's lost and found, and kitchen essentials Ryan had duplicates of. "We would have been in real trouble if you hadn't stopped that night." "Sometimes things happen for a reason," Ryan replied. As winter gave way to spring, a new pattern emerged. Sarah worked at the school during the day and picked up evening shifts at a local diner. The children spent afternoons at Ryan's house until Sarah finished work. Dylan's grades improved with Emma's patient tutoring, and Liam began to lose the nervous habit of hoarding food, finally believing that meals would be regular and certain. Ryan found himself looking forward to the chaotic hour when all 3 children burst through his door after school, filling his house with stories and laughter. And later, when Sarah arrived, tired but always with a warm smile, the 5 of them would share dinner as if they'd always been a unit. But beneath the surface of their growing happiness, Ryan sensed Sarah was still looking over her shoulder. She never used credit cards, preferring to pay cash for everything. She avoided having her picture taken at school functions, and she changed the route she walked to work regularly, as if checking for followers. One evening in late March, while the children were engrossed in a board game, Sarah confided that she'd spotted an unfamiliar car parked near the school for 3 days in a row. "It might be nothing," she said, but the tension in her voice suggested otherwise. "Maybe it's time to be proactive," Ryan suggested. "My cousin Mark is an attorney in Denver. He specializes in corporate whistleblower cases. Would you consider talking to him about what Michael might have found?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to fight back, but the kids deserve stability. They deserve to feel safe." The following weekend, Mark drove up from Denver to meet with Sarah. Ryan took the children fishing at a nearby lake, giving the adults privacy to discuss sensitive matters. When they returned, Sarah looked both drained and somehow lighter, as if sharing her burden had relieved some of its weight. Mark thinks the flash drive might contain evidence of financial misconduct at Blackwood, she told Ryan that night as they sat on his porch. He's going to connect me with a computer security expert who might be able to decrypt it. That's good news, Ryan said, noticing how the moonlight softened the worry lines that usually creased Sarah's forehead. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. I've spent the last year and a half being afraid, Sarah confessed. I'd forgotten what it feels like to hope. 2 days later, as Ryan was finishing up a bathroom renovation for a client, he received an urgent call from Sarah. Her voice was tight with fear. Someone broke into the apartment while we were at work and school, she said. They tore the place apart. Ryan rushed to her apartment to find it in disarray, drawers emptied, furniture upended, even the children's few possessions scattered across the floor. Local police officers were taking photographs and dusting for fingerprints, but their expressions suggested they held little hope of finding the culprits. Was anything taken? Ryan asked. Sarah shook her head, clutching her ever-present backpack. They didn't find what they were looking for. That night, Ryan insisted Sarah and the children stay at his house again. As they settled the kids into their former sleeping arrangements, Ryan made a decision. I think you should move back in here, he said. Not just temporarily. The house is more secure, and you wouldn't be alone. Sarah looked at him, searching his face. Ryan, I can't ask that of you. You're not asking. I'm offering, he replied. The kids are happier when they're together anyway. And he paused, gathering courage. I'm happier when you're here too. The admission hung between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily over the weeks. Sarah's eyes softened, but before she could respond, Ryan's phone rang. It was Mark. The tech guy cracked the encryption, Mark said without preamble. Ryan, this is big. The files show systematic fraud at Blackwood, falsified investment returns, misappropriation of client funds, possible tax evasion. No wonder they've been hunting for this drive. What does this mean for Sarah? Ryan asked. It means she needs to testify, Mark replied. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is already involved. They're preparing to move against Blackwood, but they need Sarah to authenticate the drive and confirm how Michael came into possession of these files. When Ryan relayed this information to Sarah, she paled. Testify against Blackwood? These people have been threatening us for over a year. What will they do when they find out I'm helping build a case against them? The FBI can offer protection, Ryan assured her, though his own heart raced at the thought of what they were facing. And you won't be alone. We'll face this together. As Sarah processed this development, Emma appeared in the doorway, Liam close behind her. Both children had clearly overheard enough to understand that something significant was happening. Are we in trouble again, Mom? Emma asked, her young face serious beyond her years. Sarah crossed the room and gathered both children into her arms. No, sweetheart. I think we might finally be finding our way out of trouble. Looking over their heads, she met Ryan's gaze, a new resolve hardening in her eyes. I'm done running, she said. It's time to stand and fight, for them, for Michael's memory, and for all the other people Blackwood has hurt. That night, as a spring storm rattled the windows of Ryan's house, their house now, plans were made. Tomorrow, they would meet with FBI agents. Documents would be signed, statements recorded, arrangements for security put in place. There would be danger ahead. But for the first time since Michael's death, Sarah felt the solid ground of justice beneath her feet. What none of them knew was that the encrypted files contained more than evidence of corporate fraud. Hidden within the data was proof of an inheritance that would change everything. A truth that would soon be revealed in a judge's chambers, altering not just Sarah's future, but the lives of everyone who had become part of her unexpected new family. 3 weeks after the break-in at Sarah's apartment, the Jackson family had fully settled into life at Ryan's house. Emma and Liam now shared the spare bedroom, decorated with posters of planets and race cars reflecting their individual interests. The initial awkwardness of their living arrangement had given way to a comfortable routine, though the looming legal battle cast a shadow over their newfound stability. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with Mark, reviewing the statement Sarah would give to the FBI later that day. "Are you sure this is comprehensive enough?" Ryan asked, pushing his half-empty coffee mug aside. "I want them to understand exactly what she's been through." Mark nodded, his expression serious. "It covers everything from Michael's final days to the threats and break-ins. The Bureau is particularly interested in the names Sarah overheard, especially Thomas Blackwood Jr. Thomas Blackwood Jr. was the son of the investment firm's founder and its current CEO. According to the decrypted files, he had personally orchestrated the massive fraud scheme that had bilked clients out of millions. "What about the children's safety during all this?" Ryan asked. The question that had been keeping him awake at night. "The FBI has arranged for a security detail," Mark assured him. "Discreet, but effective. And once Sarah's deposition is recorded, they'll have the option of temporary relocation until the case goes to trial." Ryan's stomach tightened at the thought of Sarah and the children leaving Mapleton, leaving him. Over the past months, they had become essential parts of his life. Dylan was happier than Ryan had seen him since Lisa's death, and Ryan himself had begun to imagine a future with Sarah that extended beyond the resolution of her legal troubles. Before he could voice these concerns, the front door opened. Sarah entered, her face flushed from the spring warmth, a manila envelope clutched in her hand. "I just got this," she said, waving the envelope. "It's a summons to appear in family court in Portland next Monday." Mark frowned, taking the document. "This isn't related to the FBI investigation. It's a separate civil matter." He scanned the contents, his eyebrows rising. "According to this, Michael's parents are seeking custody of Emma and Liam." "What?" Sarah's voice cracked. "That's impossible. They've never even met the children. Michael was estranged from his family for years before we married. It says here they claim you're an unfit mother due to unstable housing and employment history," Mark read, his tone neutral, but his expression troubled. Sarah sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "They're using my circumstances against me." Circumstances their son's employer created. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Ryan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We'll fight this too. Mark, can you represent Sarah in family court?" "Oregon isn't my jurisdiction," Mark admitted, "but I have colleagues in Portland who specialize in family law. I'll make some calls right away." As Mark stepped outside to make his calls, Ryan knelt beside Sarah's chair. "Listen to me. No court in this country would take those children from you. You've done everything humanly possible to protect them." Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "These people have money and influence. What if—" "No what-ifs," Ryan interrupted gently. "We deal with facts, and the fact is, you're an amazing mother who's kept her children safe despite impossible odds." Sarah took a deep breath, then nodded once. The vulnerable moment passed, and Ryan watched as she armored herself once more with the quiet strength that had first drawn him to her. That afternoon, Sarah gave her statement to 2 FBI agents in the conference room of Mapleton's small police station. Ryan waited outside with the children, fielding their questions about why their mother was talking to important people in suits. Emma, perceptive as always, understood more than she let on, while Liam was easily distracted by the vending machine and the friendly dispatcher who showed him how the radio system worked. When Sarah emerged 3 hours later, she looked drained, but resolute. "It's done," she said simply. "They have everything now, names, dates, the contents of the flash drive. The special agent in charge thinks arrests could happen as early as next week." "That's good news," Ryan said, though he knew it was only one battle in their ongoing war. The following Monday found them in Portland, seated in the austere chambers of family court judge Eleanor Martinez. Sarah wore a borrowed suit that emphasized her slender frame, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Beside her sat Brenda Hoffman, the family law attorney Mark had arranged, a formidable woman with 20 years of experience in custody battles. Across the aisle, a well-dressed older couple stared straight ahead, flanked by two attorneys whose expensive suits and leather briefcases marked them as high-priced legal talent. George and Patricia Jackson had the same aristocratic features as their late son, but none of the warmth that Sarah had described in Michael. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Martinez entered. The proceedings began with the Jacksons, lead attorney outlining their case for custody. Sarah's period of homelessness, her frequent relocations, her inability to provide stable housing without assistance. He painted a picture of grieving grandparents, seeking only to provide the security their beloved son would have wanted for his children. When it was Brenda Hoffman's turn to speak, she approached the bench with calm confidence. "Your Honor, my client has overcome extraordinary circumstances to protect her children," Brenda began. "Circumstances directly related to her husband's former employer, Blackwood Investments, a company currently under federal investigation for fraud and intimidation, a company with direct ties to the petitioners in this case." The Jacksons' attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection. These unsubstantiated accusations are irrelevant to the custody matter at hand." Judge Martinez raised a hand. "I'll allow it, but please connect this to the custody issue quickly, Counselor." Brenda nodded. "Your Honor, the Jacksons are major shareholders in Blackwood Investments. They have never before expressed interest in their grandchildren's welfare. We believe this custody petition is merely an attempt to silence Mrs. Jackson before the federal case against Blackwood goes to trial." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Martinez's expression remained impassive, but her gaze sharpened as it moved between Sarah and the elder Jacksons. "These are serious allegations," the judge said. "Do you have evidence to support them?" "We do," Brenda confirmed. "We've submitted documentation showing the Jacksons' financial interest in Blackwood, as well as records of threats made against my client following her husband's death. Threats that forced her into the very unstable living situation now being used against her." The morning proceeded with testimony from both sides. Patricia Jackson spoke tearfully of her desire to know her grandchildren, claiming Michael had reached out to reconcile shortly before his death. George Jackson testified about the trust fund they had established for Emma and Liam's education, a fund that could only be accessed if the children were in their care. When Sarah took the stand, she spoke quietly but with unwavering conviction about her efforts to keep her children safe, educated, and emotionally supported despite their circumstances. She acknowledged the periods of instability, but emphasized that the children had never missed school, had always received medical care, and had been shielded as much as possible from adult concerns. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Martinez asked, "can you explain why you believe your in-law's petition is connected to the Blackwood investigation?" Sarah straightened her shoulders. 3 days after Michael's funeral, George Jackson came to our apartment. He asked for Michael's personal laptop and any files he might have brought home from work. When I said I didn't have them, he told me. She paused, collecting herself. He told me that if I knew what was good for my children, I would forget anything Michael might have told me about the company. George Jackson's face reddened, but he remained silent as Sarah continued. 2 weeks later, men claiming to be from Blackwood's security team forced their way into our apartment while I was at work. They threatened our babysitter and searched the place. That's when I knew we had to leave. By noon, Judge Martinez called a recess, announcing she would review the submitted evidence in chambers. As they waited in the courthouse corridor, Ryan sat between Emma and Liam, helping them with a word puzzle book he'd brought along. Sarah paced nervously, stopping occasionally to check her phone for updates from the FBI agent assigned to their case. "Whatever happens in there," Ryan said quietly, "when the children were absorbed in their activity, we'll handle it together. If we need to appeal, we will." Sarah nodded, her gaze lingering on her children. "I just keep thinking about how Michael would feel, knowing his parents are trying to use his children as leverage." Before Ryan could respond, the bailiff appeared, to summon them back to the courtroom. As they took their seats, Ryan noticed a new person had entered, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s who slipped into a seat at the back of the room. Judge Martinez surveyed the assembled parties, her expression giving nothing away. "During the recess, I received some information relevant to this case," she began. "I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties, as well as additional documentation that has just come to my attention." She lifted a folder from her bench. "This morning, my clerk received a package from the office of Harold Winters, Esquire." She gestured to the older man who had entered during the recess. "Mr. Winters represents the estate of Eleanor Blackwood, the late founder of Blackwood Investments and mother of Thomas Blackwood Sr." A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. The Jacksons exchanged alarmed glances. "Mr. Winters has provided authenticated documents indicating that Michael Jackson was, in fact, the biological grandson of Eleanor Blackwood through her daughter, Margaret, who was given up for adoption in 1955. It appears that shortly before her death last month, Eleanor Blackwood learned of this connection and amended her will accordingly." Judge Martinez looked directly at Sarah. "Mrs. Jackson, according to these documents, your late husband was the legal heir to a significant portion of the Blackwood family fortune, a fortune separate from the investment firm now under investigation. As his widow and the mother of his children, you and your children are now the beneficiaries of this inheritance." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. George Jackson half rose from his seat, his face contorted in disbelief, while his wife gripped the railing in front of her with white-knuckled hands. "Order," Judge Martinez called, tapping her gavel. When the room quieted, she continued, "The estimated value of this inheritance is approximately $47 million, to be held in trust for the minor children with Mrs. Jackson as trustee." Sarah swayed slightly in her seat, her face draining of color. Ryan instinctively reached for her hand, steadying her. "Given this new information," the judge continued, "and considering the evidence regarding the petitioner's potential conflicts of interest, I am denying the motion for custodial rights. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order, preventing George and Patricia Jackson from approaching Mrs. Jackson or her children pending the resolution of the federal investigation into Blackwood Investments." With a final tap of her gavel, Judge Martinez concluded, "This court is adjourned." The next hour passed in a blur. Mr. Winters approached them outside the courtroom, offering his card and requesting a meeting the following day to discuss the inheritance details. The Jacksons departed without a word, escorted by their grim-faced attorneys. Reporters who had caught wind of the dramatic turn of events gathered in the courthouse lobby, shouting questions about the Blackwood fortune and the FBI investigation. Brenda Hoffman guided them through a side exit to avoid the media frenzy, arranging for a car to take them directly to their hotel. In a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant, over untouched plates of food, they finally had a moment to process what had happened. $47 million, Sarah whispered, the number seemingly too large to comprehend. Michael never knew. He always said his mother died when he was young. He must have been told she was dead rather than adopted. Eleanor Blackwood must have discovered the connection when she was settling her affairs, Ryan suggested. Maybe she was trying to make amends for what her family had done. Or maybe she was just sticking it to her son and grandson one last time, Brenda added. With a dry smile, The Blackwood family feuds are legendary in certain circles. Emma, who had been quiet throughout the day, finally spoke. "Does this mean we don't have to be afraid anymore? We can stop running?" Sarah gathered her daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart. I think our running days are over." Liam, more concerned with immediate matters, asked, "Can we go home now? I miss Dylan and our room." The simple question brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Home was no longer a concept, but a specific place. Ryan's house in Mapleton, with its creaky stairs and warm kitchen. Somehow, in the midst of all their troubles, they had found not just shelter but belonging. The following day's meeting with Harold Winters revealed the full extent of Eleanor Blackwood's bequest. Beyond the monetary inheritance, there was a historic estate outside Portland and a collection of art and antiques valued in the millions. The elderly woman had been meticulous in her planning, establishing trusts for Emma and Liam's education and future needs, while ensuring Sarah would have resources to support the family comfortably. "Mrs. Blackwood also left this for you," Mr. Winter said, passing Sarah a sealed envelope. "She asked that you read it privately." Later that evening, after the children were asleep in their hotel room, Sarah opened the envelope in the presence of Ryan alone. Inside was a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. "My dear Sarah," it began, "we never met, but I came to know you through the private investigators I hired when I learned of my grandson's existence. They told me of your courage in the face of my family's shameful actions, of your dedication to your children, my great-grandchildren, and of the integrity that has guided you through these difficult times. I have spent the last years of my life watching my son and grandson corrupt the company my husband and I built. Their greed has caused immeasurable harm, including, I fear, to your husband. While I cannot undo the damage they have done, I can ensure that you and your children are provided for as Michael would have wanted. The inheritance I leave you comes with no conditions except one: live well, build the life you deserve, and know that at least one member of the Blackwood family recognize the true meaning of legacy, not wealth or power, but the character we nurture in the next generation. In Emma and Liam, that legacy appears to be in excellent hands. The letter was signed simply Eleanor, in an elegant, if slightly tremulous hand. Sarah folded the letter carefully, her expression thoughtful. She must have known what Thomas Jr. was doing at the company. Maybe this was her way of making it right, or her way of making sure justice was served, Ryan suggested. The timing of her amendment to the will, just before the FBI investigation, it can't be coincidence. They sat in contemplative silence, the weight of the day's revelations settling around them. Finally, Sarah turned to Ryan, her eyes clear and direct in a way he hadn't seen before, unburdened by fear for the first time since they'd met. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "To us, I mean. Everything's changed." Ryan took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "Has it? You're still you. I'm still me. The kids are still the kids. The circumstances around us have changed. But what's between us? That's been building regardless of any of this." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. "I've been so focused on survival for so long. The idea of having choices, of building something instead of just holding on." She trailed off, overwhelmed by the possibilities before her. "We can figure it out together," Ryan said. "One day at a time, just like we have been." The ringing of Sarah's phone interrupted the moment. It was the FBI agent assigned to their case, calling with news that arrest warrants had been issued for Thomas Blackwood Jr. and 3 other executives. The investigation was moving forward, bolstered by the evidence Michael had gathered and Sarah had preserved. As Sarah relayed the news to Ryan, a sense of completion settled over her. Michael's death would not be in vain. The people who had threatened her family would face justice, and most importantly, Emma and Liam would grow up safe, secure in the knowledge that both their parents had fought for what was right, regardless of the cost. In the quiet hotel room, with the Portland skyline glittering beyond the window, Sarah allowed herself to truly envision a future. Not just survival, but a life filled with purpose and joy. A life that somehow, against all odds, included the kind-hearted contractor who had stopped to help a desperate family on a snowy evening. "When we go back to Mapleton," she said, "I want to set up a foundation in Michael's name. Something to help families in crisis, especially those facing housing insecurity." Ryan nodded, his eyes warm with admiration. "That sounds perfect." "And then," Sarah continued, her voice strengthening with each word, "I think we should talk about making our current living arrangement a bit more permanent." Ryan's smile widened. "Now that," he said, leaning forward to brush his lips against hers, "sounds even better." Outside their door, the hotel corridor was quiet, the children sleeping peacefully just a room away. Tomorrow would bring meetings with lawyers and bankers, decisions about their future, and the first steps toward building a new life. But for now, in this moment, there was just the two of them, a connection forged in hardship, tested by adversity, and finally free to flourish in the light of an unexpected second chance. The return to Mapleton felt like a homecoming in the truest sense of the word. As Ryan pulled his truck into the driveway, Dylan burst through the front door, unable to contain his excitement at seeing Emma and Liam again. The three children collided in a tangle of limbs and laughter, already sharing stories about their days apart, as if they'd been separated for months instead of just a week. Mrs. Lawson, who had looked after Dylan during their absence, emerged from the house with a casserole in hand. Her eyes widened at the sight of the sleek town car that had followed Ryan's truck, a vehicle provided by Harold Winters to transport Sarah and the FBI agent assigned to their security. "I hear congratulations are in order," the elderly woman said, embracing Sarah. News traveled quickly in small towns, and the story of the Blackwood inheritance had made national headlines. "Though I suspect things are going to be a bit more complicated for a while." Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of gratitude and trepidation. "Thank you for taking care of Dylan. And you're right, complicated doesn't begin to cover it." That evening, after the children were asleep, Ryan and Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching as the security agent conducted a perimeter check of the property. The spring air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of apple blossoms from the neighbors. "Tree, Harold Winters called while you were putting the kids to bed," Sarah said. "The formal transfer of assets begins tomorrow. He's arranged for a financial advisor to fly in from Denver." Ryan nodded, trying to wrap his mind around the dramatic shift in their circumstances. "Are you still planning to stay in Mapleton? I'd understand if you wanted to move somewhere but grander." He attempted a light tone, but concern edged his voice. Sarah turned to face him, her expression serious. "Ryan, I meant what I said in Portland. This is home now, for all of us. Money changes our circumstances, not who we are or what matters to us." She took his hand. "I was hoping we could look for a bigger place, though. Something with enough room for everyone, but still here in town." The relief that flooded through Ryan was so profound he could only nod, words momentarily beyond him. The fear that had been lurking since the court revelation, that Sarah would take the children and build a new life elsewhere, a life that didn't include him and Dylan, dissolved in the warm certainty of her presence beside him. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of changes. With Harold Winters' guidance, Sarah established the Michael Jackson Memorial Foundation, dedicated to providing housing and legal support for families in crisis. She resigned from her school position to manage the foundation full-time, though she insisted on keeping her evening shifts at the diner to stay grounded. as she put it. Ryan watched with admiration as she navigated her new reality with the same quiet dignity that had first drawn him to her. Despite the resources now at her disposal, Sarah remained frugal in her personal spending, focusing instead on ensuring the foundation made an immediate impact in communities across the state. The arrests at Blackwood Investments sent shockwaves through the financial world. Thomas Blackwood Jr. and his associates faced multiple federal charges, and as the investigation deepened, dozens of victims came forward with stories of financial ruin at the hands of the corrupt firm. Sarah's testimony, along with Michael's meticulously gathered evidence, proved instrumental in building the government's case. By early summer, they had found a property on the outskirts of Mapleton, a sprawling farmhouse with 5 bedrooms, a barn that Ryan immediately envisioned converting into a workshop, and enough land for the children to roam freely. The previous owners, an elderly couple moving to Arizona to be near their grandchildren, were thrilled to sell to a family who would appreciate the home they had loved for 40 years. On moving day, friends and neighbors formed a volunteer convoy of pickup trucks and SUVs, transporting their modest belongings from Ryan's house to the new property. Sarah had insisted on bringing everything, including Ryan's worn furniture and the children's makeshift decorations, wanting the new house to feel like an extension of the home they had built together rather than a fresh start. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their new yard, the last of the helpers departed with promises to return for a proper housewarming party. The children had claimed their rooms and were already planning elaborate decoration schemes, their excited voices carrying through the old house's hallways. Ryan found Sarah on the wide front porch, gazing out at the mountains visible in the distance. He handed her a glass of celebratory champagne, settling beside her on the porch steps. "Happy?" he asked softly. She nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I keep thinking about that night at the bus stop. If you hadn't stopped..." "I think we would have found each other anyway," Ryan said. "Some connections are just meant to be," Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "I think you're right. And speaking of connections..." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I was going to wait, but this moment feels right." Ryan's breath caught as she opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band. "Consider this a placeholder," she said. "I thought you might like to choose your own, but I wanted you to know that I'm ready whenever you are." For a moment Ryan was speechless. Then he laughed, reaching into his own pocket to produce a ring box of his own. "Great minds think alike," he said, opening it to reveal an elegant diamond solitaire. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment." Their laughter mingled in the evening air, a joyful sound that seemed to echo the journey that had brought them to this place. From a chance encounter in a snowstorm to a shared future neither could have imagined. Later that night, after exchanging rings and promises, they checked on the sleeping children before settling on the porch swing that Ryan had carefully transported from his old house. The security agent's car was parked discreetly down the driveway, a reminder that their story was still unfolding, with the Blackwood trial still months away. "Do you ever wonder what Michael would think of all this?" Ryan asked, his arm wrapped around Sarah's shoulders. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think he'd be glad the children are safe and happy, and I think he'd approve of the foundation. It's exactly the kind of work he always wanted to do, using privilege to help others rather than exploit them." She tilted her head to look up at Ryan. "And I think he'd approve of you, of us. He always said life was too short not to follow your heart." As if on cue, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, a brilliant flash of light against the deep blue canvas. "Make a wish," Ryan whispered. Sarah smiled, her eyes following the star's path until it disappeared. "No need," she said. "I already have everything I could wish for." The months that followed brought both challenges and joys. The Blackwood trial dominated national headlines, with Sarah's testimony providing a pivotal turning point in the proceedings. Thomas Blackwood Jr. was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, his father to 15, and restitution was ordered for the victims of their fraud. George and Patricia Jackson made one final attempt to contest Eleanor Blackwood's will, but their case was swiftly dismissed. They retreated to their estate in Palm Springs, all contact with Sarah and the children severed by mutual agreement and court order. The foundation flourished under Sarah's guidance, expanding to neighboring states and partnering with legal aid societies to provide comprehensive support for families facing housing insecurity. Ryan's contracting business grew as well, specializing in renovating and repairing affordable housing units purchased by the foundation. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after the snowy evening, when Ryan's truck had pulled up to the bus stop, Sarah and Ryan were married in the backyard of their farmhouse. Emma served as maid of honor, while Dylan and Liam shared best man duties with equal seriousness. Mrs. Lawson caught the bouquet, much to her embarrassed delight, and Mark delivered a toast that left few dry eyes among the gathered friends and neighbors. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of autumn flowers, with mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Sarah thought of the letter from Eleanor Blackwood. "Live well," the formidable woman had written, looking at the family they had built, two people who had each lost so much, finding new beginnings with each other, and 3 children bonded by experiences that transcended blood relation. Sarah knew they were honoring that request in the fullest possible way. The inheritance that had once seemed like an ending, the conclusion to Michael's story, the resolution of their legal battles, had instead become a beginning. Not because of the wealth itself, but because of the freedom it granted them to build something meaningful together, to transform their individual losses into a shared legacy of resilience and hope. As Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, the same placeholder band she had given him on moving day, now engraved with their initials and the date they had first met, Sarah made a silent promise. To Michael, to Eleanor Blackwood, to the children watching with shining eyes, but most of all to the man whose simple act of kindness on a winter evening had changed everything. They would live well. They would build something lasting. And they would never forget that the greatest inheritance of all was the family they had found in each other. 5 years had passed since Sarah and Ryan's wedding in the backyard of their farmhouse. The Michael Jackson Memorial Foundation had grown from a local initiative into a nationally recognized organization with branches in 12 states. What had begun as a mission to provide housing assistance had expanded to include legal aid, job, training, and comprehensive support for families in crisis. On a warm June morning, Sarah stood in the foundation's headquarters, a renovated historic building in downtown Mapleton that had once served as the town's first bank. The irony of transforming a symbol of financial power into a center for community support wasn't lost on her. Through the large windows, she could see the town square, where a farmer's market was in full swing, colorful canopies dotting the green space. "The Seattle paperwork just came through," announced Melissa Chen, the foundation's operations director, and Sarah's right hand. "We're officially cleared to break ground on the new family transitional housing complex next month." Sarah smiled, taking the folder Melissa offered. 36 units with on-site childcare and job placement services. Michael would have been amazed to see how far we've come. "Speaking of amazing," Melissa said, glancing at her watch, "Aren't you supposed to be at the courthouse in 20 minutes? Judge Martinez flew in specifically for this hearing." Sarah's eyes widened. "Is it 11 already? Ryan's meeting me there with the kids." She gathered her belongings quickly, pausing only to straighten the large portrait of Michael that hung in the reception area. A candid photo capturing him mid-laugh, his eyes crinkled with joy. Beside it hung a smaller, more formal image of Eleanor Blackwood, her expression stern but with a hint of satisfaction, as if she approved of how her legacy was being put to use. The Mapleton County Courthouse had been renovated the previous year, partly funded by a donation from the foundation. As Sarah hurried up the steps, she spotted Ryan waiting at the entrance, surrounded by their children. At 15, Emma had blossomed into a poised young woman with her mother's quiet determination and her father's intellectual curiosity. 13-year-old. Dylan and Liam, now inseparable despite their different parentage, were engaged in an animated discussion about their robotics team's upcoming competition. And then there was Olivia, their surprise addition, born 2 years after their wedding. At 3 years old, she was a whirlwind of energy with Ryan's warm brown eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin, currently attempting to climb the courthouse railing while her father gently restrained her. "Sorry, I'm late," Sarah called, hurrying to join them. Ryan's face lit up at the sight of her, the same way it had every day for the past 6 years. "We just got here," he assured her, leaning in for a quick kiss, "though someone is very impatient to see her favorite judge." He nodded toward Olivia, who was now squirming to be released from his grip. Inside, the familiar figure of Judge Eleanor Martinez waited in her chambers. Though officially retired now, she had maintained a special interest in the Jackson Miller family, occasionally serving as a mentor to Emma, who had developed aspirations toward a legal career. "There they are," the judge said warmly as they entered. Though her hair had more silver than black now, her sharp intelligence remained unchanged. "Are we all ready for the big moment?" The big moment was the culmination of months of preparation and years of healing. Today, Ryan would legally adopt Emma and Liam, making official what had long since become emotional reality. And simultaneously, Sarah would adopt Dylan, completing their blended family in the eyes of the law. The process had been delayed several times, first by the complexities of the Blackwood legal proceedings, then by the children's own request to wait until they felt ready. Emma, in particular, had needed time to reconcile her memories of Michael with her growing bond with Ryan. It had been Emma herself who had finally approached them 6 months ago, saying simply, "I think it's time we made it official." The proceeding itself was brief but emotional. Judge Martinez reviewed the paperwork, asked each child individually if this was their wish, and then signed the documents with a flourish. "By the power vested in me by the state of Colorado," she announced, "I hereby recognize the legal adoption of Emma and Liam Jackson by Ryan Miller and Dylan Miller by Sarah Jackson Miller. Furthermore, by request of all parties, the children's legal surnames shall henceforth be Jackson Miller." Olivia, not entirely clear on the proceedings but sensing their importance, broke the momentary silence that followed by clapping her hands enthusiastically. "We're all the same now," she declared with the simple clarity of a 3-year-old. Judge Martinez smiled. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said. "Congratulations to all of you." That evening they hosted a celebration dinner at their farmhouse. The property had transformed over the years. Ryan's workshop in the converted barn now employed 3 full-time craftsmen, specializing in custom furniture for foundation housing units. The backyard featured a tree house he had built with the boys, a vegetable garden that Sarah tended with Emma's help, and a recently added pool that had become the neighborhood gathering spot in summer months. Friends and extended family filled the large dining room. Mrs. Lawson, now approaching 90 but still sharp as ever, held court at one end of the table, regaling younger guests with stories of the early days when Sarah and her children had first arrived in Mapleton. Mark and his wife sat nearby, their twin daughters playing with Olivia in the adjoining family room. Melissa Chen had brought her husband and son, who was currently engaged in an intense chess match with Emma. As Ryan surveyed the scene, a wave of contentment washed over him. The journey that had brought them here had been neither straight nor easy, but every challenge had ultimately strengthened the bonds between them. Sarah appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his. "Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about how full the house is," he said. "Remember when it was just Dylan and me, rattling around in that old place on Cedar Lane?" Sarah nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. Did I tell you I got a letter from Patricia Jackson yesterday?" Ryan raised an eyebrow in surprise. They hadn't heard from Michael's parents in years, not since their failed attempt to contest Eleanor's will. "What did she want?" "To apologize, believe it or not," Sarah said. "George passed away last month. She wrote that his final years were spent in regret over their actions, especially their treatment of Michael. She asked if she could send Christmas and birthday gifts to Emma and Liam." "How do you feel about that?" Sarah was thoughtful. "I'm inclined to allow it, with the kids' permission. They're old enough to decide for themselves, and holding on to bitterness doesn't serve anyone." She smiled slightly. "The foundation has taught me a lot about second chances." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest. Harold Winters, now well into his 70s, stood in the doorway, leaning on a cane, but otherwise unchanged by the years. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, extending a hand to Ryan. "I was in Denver for a conference and thought I'd personally deliver some news." Sarah ushered him to a seat, quickly arranging a plate of food. The elderly attorney had remained a trusted advisor over the years, helping navigate the complex financial and legal landscape that accompanied Eleanor Blackwood's inheritance. "What brings you all this way, Harold?" Sarah asked once he was settled. "The final Blackwood investment victims' settlement was approved yesterday," he announced. "The last of the restitution payments will be distributed next month. It's officially over." A weight Sarah hadn't realized she was still carrying seemed to lift from her shoulders. Though Thomas Blackwood Jr. and his associates had been imprisoned years ago, the civil proceedings had dragged on, with victims fighting for compensation from the company's remaining assets. "That's wonderful news," Ryan said, raising his glass, in a small toast to closure. Harold nodded, but his expression suggested he had more to say. "There's something else. Before I left Portland, I was contacted by Thomas Blackwood Sr.'s attorney. Despite still serving his sentence, he's apparently had a change of heart about certain matters. He's requested a meeting with you, Sarah." Sarah's hand tightened around her glass. After all this time, what could he possibly want? "He claims to have information about Michael's last days, things he believes you should know," Harold replied. "Of course, you're under no obligation to meet with him." The table had gone quiet, the other guests sensing the gravity of the conversation. Emma, who had approached unnoticed, spoke from behind Sarah. "I think you should go, Mom," she said, her young face solemn. "We should know everything we can about Dad." "About Michael," she corrected herself, still adjusting to the day's legal changes. Sarah looked at her daughter, struck again by how much she had matured. "We'll discuss it," she promised, "as a family." The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the evening progressed, but Sarah's mind kept returning to Harold's news. What information could Thomas Blackwood possibly have that would matter after all these years? And was it worth reopening wounds that had finally begun to heal? After the guests had departed and the younger children were in bed, Sarah found Emma sitting on the porch swing, gazing at the stars. In the soft outdoor lighting, Sarah could see both the child Emma had been and the woman she was becoming, thoughtful, resilient, with an old soul's wisdom in her young eyes. "Can I join you?" Sarah asked. Emma nodded, moving over to make room. For a few minutes they swung in comfortable silence, listening to the chorus of crickets and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. "I've been thinking about what Mr. Winters said," Emma began, "about Thomas Blackwood wanting to meet with you." "I haven't decided what to do about that yet," Sarah said. "Part of me wants to leave the past in the past." Emma nodded slowly. "I understand that, but I've been reading about restorative justice in my law club at school. Sometimes hearing directly from the person who harmed you can help with healing. And sometimes the person who did the harm needs to make amends to move forward." Sarah studied her daughter's profile, marveling at her insight. "When did you get so wise?" Emma smiled. "I had good teachers." She hesitated, then added, "I have some memories of Michael that I'm afraid I'll lose as I get older. Anything you could learn about him, about who he really was and what he was fighting for, I think it would help me hold on to him." Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Then we'll go together if you want." The meeting was arranged for the following month at the minimum security facility, where Thomas Blackwood Sr. was serving his sentence. Sarah and Emma traveled to Oregon together, using the opportunity to visit Michael's grave for the first time in years. They laid fresh flowers beside the simple headstone, now bearing the additional inscription, "Beloved Father, Husband, and Champion of Justice." Thomas Blackwood Sr. was not what Sarah had expected. The imposing financial titan who had once dominated boardrooms had been reduced to a frail old man in a standard-issue jumpsuit. His eyes, however, retained a sharp clarity as Sarah and Emma were shown into the visitation room. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice rougher than Sarah remembered from court. "I wasn't sure you would." "We're here to listen," Sarah replied, her tone neutral. "That's all I can promise." Thomas nodded, accepting her terms. "I've had a lot of time to reflect here," he began. "My son and we lost sight of what mattered. The company my mother built was meant to help people secure their futures, not destroy them." He paused, gathering himself. "Michael figured it out before anyone else. He came to me first, you know. Before he went to the authorities, he showed me the discrepancies he'd found, the client accounts that had been drained. He gave me a chance to make it right." Sarah tensed. "And you threatened him instead." "I did," Thomas acknowledged, his gaze dropping to his hands. "It's the greatest regret of my life. Not just because it led to all this," he gestured to the room around them, "but because Michael was exactly the kind of man my mother always wanted in the family. Principled, unwavering." "Why are you telling us this now?" Emma asked, speaking. For the first time, Thomas looked at her, really seeing her. "You have his eyes," he said softly, "and his directness." He reached slowly into the pocket of his jumpsuit and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "I found this among my personal effects that were seized. It's the last email Michael sent me the day before he died." Sarah accepted the paper with trembling fingers. The printed email was brief, but unmistakably in Michael's voice. "Thomas, I'm giving you one final opportunity to do the right thing. The evidence has been secured and will find its way to the proper authorities, with or without my involvement. But it doesn't have to end with the company's destruction. Make restitution to the affected clients, step down if necessary. But save what can be saved, not for your sake or mine, but for the people who depend on Blackwood for their livelihoods. This isn't about vengeance, it's about justice and redemption. Even now, both are still possible." Michael's tears blurred Sarah's vision as she read the words. It was so perfectly Michael, extending an olive branch even while standing his ground, believing in the possibility of redemption until the very end. "His heart attack," Sarah said, looking up at Thomas. "Was it really natural?" The question that had haunted her for years hung in the air between them. Thomas's expression was pained, but direct. "Yes. I had nothing to do with his death, nor did my son. That at least is not on our conscience. The medical examiner was thorough. There was a congenital heart defect that had gone undetected. The stress of the situation may have contributed, but there was no foul play. Sarah nodded, accepting his answer with a strange sense of relief. She had long since made peace with Michael's death, but the lingering question of possible murder had remained a shadow in the back of her mind. "There's one more thing," Thomas said. "Something my mother told me before she died, after she'd amended her will. Michael wasn't just any distant relative she discovered. He was the grandson of the man she had truly loved but couldn't marry. Because of family objections, she gave up their child for adoption, married my father for his business connections, and spent the rest of her life wondering what might have been." He met Sarah's gaze directly. When she learned about Michael, about the stand he was taking against the corruption in the company, she said it was like seeing the road not taken. That's why she left everything to you and the children, not just as restitution, but as recognition. That Michael represented the best of what the Blackwood name could have been. The revelation settled over Sarah and Emma like the final piece of a complex puzzle falling into place. Michael's integrity, his courage, his willingness to stand against wrongdoing even at personal cost. These were the true inheritance he had left his family, more valuable than any fortune. As they left the correctional facility, Emma linked her arm through her mother's. "Are you okay?" she asked. Sarah nodded, surprising herself with how true it was. "I think I needed that closure more than I realized. To know that Michael was exactly who we believed him to be, right until the end. He would be proud of what you've built," Emma said, "of who we've all become." Sarah smiled, thinking of their extended family waiting back in Mapleton. Ryan and the boys probably working on their latest project in the workshop, Olivia likely helping Mrs. Lawson bake cookies, the foundation offices humming with activity as lives were being changed for the better every day. "We've honored his memory the best way possible," she agreed, "by living well, just as Eleanor asked us to do." As their car pulled away from the facility, Sarah felt the weight of the past lightening. There would always be a place in her heart for Michael and the life they had shared, just as there would always be gratitude toward Eleanor Blackwood for the second chance her inheritance had provided. But the future, bright, hopeful, and full of purpose, beckoned with promises yet to be fulfilled. That future had begun with a simple act of kindness on a snowy evening, when a struggling single father had stopped to help a family in need. Everything that followed, the revelations, the inheritance, the foundation, had grown from that moment of human connection. It was a reminder that sometimes the most significant turns in life's journey aren't marked by dramatic events, but by small choices made with an open heart. The 10th anniversary celebration of the Michael Jackson Memorial Foundation transformed downtown Mapleton into a festival of community and hope. Banners stretched across Main Street. Volunteers in matching blue T-shirts directed visitors to various activities, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. What had begun as a local initiative had grown into a national model for comprehensive family support, with affiliate programs in 27 states and a growing international presence. In the decades since the Foundation's inception, over 5,000 families had been housed, 3,000 children had received educational support, and countless lives had been stabilized through legal aid and job placement services. The annual celebration had become a tradition, part fundraiser, part community gathering, and part reminder of the Foundation's core mission, transforming adversity into opportunity. In the town square, a temporary stage had been erected for the day's speakers. Sarah stood to the side, reviewing her notes while Ryan adjusted the microphone stand. At 46, Sarah's dark hair now featured streaks of silver that she made no attempt to conceal. The worry lines that had once marked her face had softened into the gentler creases of laughter and experience. Ryan, approaching 50, had maintained his contractor's physique despite taking on a more administrative role in his now thriving business. "Nervous?" he asked, catching her eye. Sarah smiled. "After 10 years of public speaking, not really, though having the governor in the audience is a bit intimidating." "You'll be fantastic," Ryan assured her, giving her shoulder a squeeze before stepping away to check on the children. The children were hardly that anymore. Emma, now 20, was home from her second year at Yale Law School, where she was thriving under the mentorship of several prominent legal scholars, including a Supreme Court justice who had taken a special interest in her career. Dylan and Liam, both 18, were preparing to start college in the fall. Dylan at Colorado State's renowned engineering program, and Liam at Berklee College of Music in Boston, his talent for composition having blossomed during high school. Only Olivia, at 8 years old, still qualified as a child. She darted through the crowd in her blue foundation t-shirt, distributing program booklets with enthusiastic efficiency. Her energy was boundless, her social skills precocious, a child who had grown up surrounded by love and purpose, never knowing the hardships her older siblings had faced. As the crowd began to gather in front of the stage, Sarah spotted familiar faces among the attendees. Harold Winters, now retired, but still serving as an advisory board member, sat in the front row with Mrs. Lawson beside him. The elderly woman had recently celebrated her 95th birthday and insisted on attending every foundation event. Though she now required a wheelchair and full-time care, Melissa Chen, who had become the foundation's executive director when Sarah stepped into the role of board chair 3 years earlier, approached the stage. "We're ready when you are," she said. "The governor just arrived, and the media is set up in the designated area." Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. The foundation's growth had brought increased visibility, something the formerly publicity-shy woman had gradually learned to navigate. Today's celebration would be covered by several national news outlets, bringing attention to their work and hopefully inspiring similar initiatives elsewhere. As she took the stage to enthusiastic applause, Sarah surveyed the gathered crowd, a mix of program beneficiaries, staff, donors, and community members. Her gaze lingered briefly on a framed photograph set up on a small table to the side of the stage, Michael's official portrait from his days at Blackwood Investments, displaying the earnest smile and clear-eyed integrity that had defined him. 10 years ago, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear, this foundation was born from both tragedy and hope. When we think about transformative moments in our lives, we often focus on the dramatic turning points, the courtroom revelations, the unexpected inheritances, the shocking discoveries. She paused, sharing a meaningful glance with Ryan. But sometimes, the most profound change begins with something much simpler, an act of basic human kindness. She recounted the foundation's journey, highlighting not just the statistics, families housed, scholarships awarded, jobs secured, but the individual stories of transformation. The single father who had gone from shelter resident to homeowner and small business operator. The teenage mother who had completed her education and now served on the foundation's youth advisory board. The elderly veteran who had found not just housing but community through their senior outreach program. These successes belong to all of us, Sarah continued. To our dedicated staff and volunteers, to our generous donors, and most importantly, to the families themselves, who trusted us with their challenges and then did the hard work of rebuilding their lives. As Sarah concluded her remarks and introduced the governor, she felt a familiar sense of wonder at the path her life had taken. The scared, homeless widow, scrambling to protect her children, had transformed into a woman of influence and purpose, using her unexpected resources to create ripples of positive change far beyond what she could have imagined. The formal program continued with several speakers, including Emma, who shared a powerful perspective as both a foundation beneficiary and a future legal advocate. Her poise and eloquence drew murmurs of approval from the audience, particularly the governor, who was visibly impressed by the young woman's command of policy issues affecting vulnerable families. After the speeches concluded, the celebration transitioned to a more festive atmosphere. Food trucks lined the perimeter of the square. Local bands performed on a secondary stage, and activity booths offered everything from face painting to financial literacy workshops. The foundation had always emphasized joy alongside practical support, recognizing that dignity and celebration were as essential as shelter and sustenance. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself approached by a woman she didn't immediately recognize, middle-aged, with a professional demeanor and a hesitant smile. "Mrs. Jackson Miller," the woman said. "I'm Jennifer Blackwood, Thomas Jr.'s daughter." Sarah tensed slightly, though years of public interaction had taught her to maintain a composed exterior. The Blackwood family had largely faded from her life following the legal proceedings, with Thomas Sr.'s prison meeting being the last direct contact. "Jennifer," Sarah acknowledged, searching for the appropriate response. "This is unexpected." The woman nodded, understanding Sarah's caution. "I've been following the Foundation's work for years, though I've never reached out. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome, given everything that happened." "That was a different time," Sarah said carefully. "Your father's actions don't define you." "Thank you for saying that," Jennifer replied. "It's taken me a long time to come to terms with the family legacy. That's partly why I'm here today." She opened her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "My grandfather, Thomas Sr., passed away last month in the prison hospice unit. He left this for you, with instructions that I deliver it personally." Sarah accepted the envelope, her mind flashing back to the similar moment years ago when Harold Winters had given her Eleanor Blackwood's letter. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, the words automatic but sincere. Jennifer's smile was tinged with sadness. "Our relationship was complicated, but in his final years, he spoke often about how your foundation had redeemed the Blackwood name in a way his financial empire never could. He followed your work closely." Sarah glanced down at the envelope, wondering what final communication Thomas Blackwood Sr. might have wanted to share. "Would you like to stay for the celebration?" she asked, surprising herself with the invitation. "See the foundation in action?" Jennifer's expression brightened. "I'd like that very much." As Jennifer moved toward the community exhibit area, Ryan appeared at Sarah's side. "Everything okay?" he asked, having observed the interaction from a distance. Sarah nodded, tucking the unopened envelope into her pocket. "I think so. Just another piece of the past, finding its way into the present." Ryan understood without further explanation. Their life together had been built on this blend of honoring what came before while creating something new, like the farmhouse they had renovated, preserving its historic bones while adapting it to serve their growing family. Emma was amazing. "Up there," he said, changing the subject. "Every time I hear her speak, I'm blown away by how much wisdom she packs into that young brain." Sarah smiled with maternal pride. "She's going to change the world, that one. All of them will, in their own ways." They watched as their children moved through the festival, Emma deep in conversation with the governor's chief of staff, Dylan and Liam manning the technology demonstration booth they had designed, Olivia leading a group of younger children in a dance performance she had choreographed herself. "They already have," Ryan said softly. Later that evening, after the celebration had concluded and the family had returned home, Sarah finally found a quiet moment to open Thomas Blackwood's letter. She sat on the porch swing, the same one from Ryan's original house, now weather-beaten but still sturdy, with Ryan beside her, a shared blanket across their laps against the evening chill. The letter was brief, the handwriting shaky but determined. "Sarah, by the time you read this, I will, have left this world and whatever justice awaits beyond. I have followed your foundation's work with great interest and admiration. What you have built from the ashes of my family's disgrace is nothing short of remarkable. My mother saw in Michael what I was too blind to see, a man of principle who understood that wealth without purpose is merely greed dressed in finer clothing. In your hands, the Blackwood fortune has found the purpose it was always meant to serve. I'm including with this letter the deed to the original Blackwood family home in Portland. The property has been in trust, untouched, since my mother's death. It seems fitting that it should become part of your foundation's work, perhaps as a West Coast headquarters or as housing for families in transition. This offering comes with no conditions and no expectations. It is not atonement. Some debts can never be fully repaid, but rather acknowledgement that even the worst mistakes can sometimes lead to unexpected good in the right hands. With respect and admiration, Thomas Blackwood Sr. attached was a formal deed transfer already processed through Harold Winter's law firm, placing the historic Blackwood mansion in the foundation's name. Sarah passed the letter to Ryan, watching his expression as he read. "What do you think?" she asked when he finished. Considered for a moment. "I think it completes the circle somehow. The company that caused so much harm is gone, but the foundation that rose from that experience now holds the original family home." He looked at her. "How do you feel about it?" Sarah gazed out at the farmhouse property, now bathed in evening shadows. The barn-turned workshop where Ryan had taught all 4 children basic carpentry skills. The garden where they grew vegetables for their table and flowers for pure joy. The massive oak tree where a swing hung, used by each child in turn, and now sometimes by Sarah and Ryan themselves, when they needed a moment of simple pleasure. "I feel at peace with it," she said finally. "The Blackwood chapter of our story has been open for so long. Maybe this is how it finally closes." Ryan nodded, understanding as he always did. "So, a West Coast headquarters? That's a big expansion." Sarah smiled. "We've been discussing the possibility for years. The need certainly exists." She leaned against his shoulder. "What do you think about spending some time in Portland, overseeing the renovation? The kids are all either in college or headed there soon. Might be a good project for us." "Trying to keep me busy in our impending empty nest?" Ryan teased, though there was a hint of genuine emotion beneath the humor. The prospect of their bustling household soon reducing to just them and Olivia was both liberating and wistful. "I thought we could take Olivia with us for the summer," Sarah suggested. "She's never spent much time on the West Coast, and there's a renowned dance program in Portland she's been eyeing in those brochures she leaves strategically around the house." Ryan laughed. "Subtle, our youngest is not." He wrapped an arm around Sarah, pulling her closer against the growing chill. "A summer project sounds perfect, though I have a feeling once you get out there, you'll find a dozen more needs to address, and our summer project will turn into something bigger." "Would that be so bad?" Sarah asked. "We've always been at our best when building something together." From inside the house came the sounds of their evening winding down. Emma's voice on a phone call, likely to her boyfriend who was interning at a DC law firm for the summer. The deeper tones of Dylan and Liam engaged in their usual good-natured debate about music versus science. Olivia's footsteps as she prepared for bed, never walking when she could dance or skip. The fullness of their life together, the foundation, the family, the legacy they were creating, settled around Sarah like a comfortable embrace. There had been challenges along the way, of course, times when the demands of the foundation competed with family needs, periods of teenage rebellion as the older children processed their complex histories, the everyday friction of strong personalities, sharing space and purpose. But through it all, they had maintained the connection that had begun on that snowy evening at the bus stop, a recognition of something essential in each other. a shared commitment to choosing kindness and growth over bitterness and stagnation. The weekend following the anniversary celebration brought another milestone event, Dylan and Liam's high school graduation. The ceremony was held in Mapleton, I's football stadium, the bleachers packed with families cheering for the graduating seniors. The Jackson Miller contingent occupied a full row, including Mrs. Lawson in her wheelchair, Harold Winters with his granddaughter who had become friends with Emma, and Melissa Chen's family. As the boys crossed the stage to receive their diplomas, Dylan, as class valedictorian, Liam, as recipient of the Fine Arts Medal, Sarah felt the familiar mixture of pride and nostalgia that accompanied these passages. It seemed like just yesterday that they had been two traumatized children huddling at a bus stop in the snow. Now they stood tall and confident, ready to embark on their independent journeys while remaining grounded in the family that had formed against all odds. At the celebratory dinner following the ceremony, held at the farmhouse with tables set up, on the sprawling lawn, Emma tapped her glass for attention. Though she had already been through her own graduation 2 years earlier, as the eldest sibling, she had assumed the role of family spokesperson for significant occasions. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her poised demeanor momentarily giving way to genuine emotion. "To Dylan and Liam, my brilliant brothers, who never let me forget that I'm the oldest, but definitely not the wisest." Laughter rippled through the gathering as she continued. "As we've grown up in this remarkable family, we've learned that biology is just the beginning of kinship. True family is built choice by choice, day by day, through actions that say, 'You matter to me especially when times are difficult.'" She raised her glass higher. "So here's to you both as you start your college adventures. May you always remember that you carry with you not just our love, but the legacy of two fathers, one who stood for justice even when it cost him everything, and one who opened his door to strangers on a snowy night and changed all our lives forever." The toast brought tears to many eyes, including Sarah's. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, she found herself contemplating the extraordinary journey from that desperate night at the bus stop to this moment of celebration and possibility. The inheritance that had once seemed like their salvation had indeed provided resources and opportunities, but the true wealth of their lives lay in these connections, this blended family forged through adversity and strengthened through compassion. The foundation that bore Michael's name had helped thousands, but perhaps the most profound transformation had occurred within their own hearts. As the evening progressed and stars appeared overhead, Sarah stood at the edge of the gathering, watching, as Ryan demonstrated a dance move to Olivia, making their youngest dissolve into giggles. Dylan was deep in conversation with Harold Winters about the law school application process, considering following his sister's path after engineering. Liam played soft background music on his guitar, the melodies weaving through the evening, air like a soundtrack to their collective story. Emma joined her mother, slipping an arm around her waist. "Good day?" she asked. Sarah nodded, unable to find words adequate to encompass the fullness in her heart. Instead, she simply held her daughter, close, grateful beyond measure for the journey that had brought them here, not to perfection, but to purpose, not to an ending, but to a continuing story of growth and possibility. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, a brief, brilliant reminder of how light can illuminate even the darkest night, and how a single moment of kindness can set in motion ripples that transform lives for generations to come. 15 years had passed since the Foundation's inception. The original Blackwood Mansion in Portland had been transformed into the West Coast headquarters of the Michael Jackson Memorial Foundation, with an east wing dedicated to transitional housing for families and a south wing serving as a community education center. What had once been a symbol of wealth and privilege now hummed with activity and purpose, its grand rooms filled with the sounds of children learning, parents rebuilding their lives, and staff coordinating resources. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood in what had once been the mansion's library, now converted into her office when she was on the West Coast. At 51, she had settled into a comfortable balance between her roles at the foundation and her personal life. The wall behind her desk displayed family photos chronicling their journey: Dylan and Liam in graduation caps, Emma receiving her law degree, Olivia at her first ballet recital, and multiple group shots showing the blended family in various configurations and locations throughout the years. A knock at the door interrupted her review of quarterly reports. Melissa Chen entered, tablet in hand, her efficient manner unchanged despite the years of friendship and collaboration. "The board members are arriving for the strategic planning retreat," Melissa announced, and Emma called to say her flight landed early. "She's on her way from the airport now." Sarah smiled at the mention of her eldest daughter. At 25, Emma had established herself as a rising star in public interest law, working for a prestigious firm in New York, but maintaining close ties to the foundation as a legal advisor. Her visits were always a highlight, bringing fresh energy and perspective to their work. "Thanks, Melissa. I'll head down to greet everyone in a few minutes." Sarah gathered her materials, glancing once more at the family photos. Has Ryan called? In from the Mapleton site. Ryan had remained based in Colorado, overseeing the foundation's original headquarters and managing his construction company, which now specialized in affordable housing projects across the Mountain West. Their marriage had evolved to accommodate periods of geographical separation as the foundation expanded, with each maintaining a home base while regularly traveling to be together. The arrangement had required adjustment, but ultimately strengthened their partnership, giving each space for individual pursuits while maintaining their shared mission. "He's already on the video conference line," Melissa confirmed. "And Liam sent over the soundtrack for the new promotional video. It's quite moving. The boy has talent." Sarah smiled at Melissa's reference to Liam as the boy, though he was now 23 and establishing himself as a composer in Los Angeles, having graduated from Berkeley with honors. His specialty had become scoring documentary films, particularly those focused on social justice issues. "I'll take a listen before the meeting. Thanks for coordinating everything, as always." As Melissa departed, Sarah's phone chimed with a text from Dylan. Now, in his final year of engineering graduate studies at MIT, he had developed an innovative modular housing system that promised to revolutionize rapid deployment of emergency shelters after natural disasters. His message included photos of the latest prototype and a quick update on his testing results. Sarah marveled at how technology had enabled their family to remain deeply connected despite the geographical distances that their various pursuits had created. Weekly video calls kept everyone updated, and their annual summer gathering at the farmhouse in Mapleton remained sacred family time, with everyone clearing their schedules to be present. Making her way downstairs to the mansion's grand foyer, now serving as a welcoming reception area for foundation visitors, Sarah was greeted by the sight of board members mingling over coffee. The strategic planning retreat had become an annual tradition, bringing together key stakeholders to assess progress and chart the foundation's course for the coming year. Harold Winters, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, sat in a comfortable chair near the fireplace, engaged in conversation with Jennifer Blackwood, who had joined the board 3 years earlier. After her initial appearance at the 10th anniversary celebration, Jennifer had gradually become involved with the foundation, offering her business expertise and working to reconcile her family legacy with the organization's mission. "Sarah," Harold called, beckoning her over. "Jennifer was just sharing some remarkable news about the Blackwood investment settlement." Jennifer nodded, her expression brightening. The final disbursements have been completed. Every identified victim has now received full restitution plus interest. It took 15 years, but the court-appointed trustees finally tracked down even the most elusive former clients. "That's wonderful news," Sarah said sincerely. The long process of making the investment firm's victims whole had been a parallel journey to the foundation's growth, a necessary complement to their forward-focused work. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "With all victims compensated, the trustees have determined that the remaining recovered assets, approximately $60 million, should be directed to the foundation as a perpetual endowment for preventative programs." Sarah's eyes widened. While the foundation had been financially secure, thanks to Eleanor Blackwood's initial bequest and subsequent donations, an endowment of this size would ensure sustainability for generations to come. It would also allow them to expand into preventative work, addressing the root causes of family housing insecurity before the crisis struck. "That's extraordinary," Sarah managed, processing the implications. "Your father would approve, I think," Jennifer nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. Thomas Blackwood Jr. remained in federal prison, though he had been transferred to a medical facility due to declining health. Over the years, he had made halting attempts at reconciliation with his daughter, the relationship gradually healing through carefully managed correspondence and occasional visits. "He's trying to make peace with his legacy," Jennifer said quietly. "This doesn't erase what happened, but it helps knowing that something positive will continue to grow from it all." The arrival of additional board members shifted the conversation to more immediate foundation matters. Sarah circulated through the room, greeting longtime supporters and newer additions to their leadership team. The foundation had deliberately built a diverse board, representing various professional backgrounds, geographical regions, and personal experiences with housing insecurity. Just as the group was preparing to move to the conference room for the official start of the retreat, the front doors opened, admitting a gust of autumn air and Emma Jackson Miller, looking every inch the accomplished attorney in a tailored suit, her mother's dark eyes scanning the room until they landed on Sarah. "Mom," Emma called, her professional demeanor giving way to the warmth of family connection as she crossed the room to embrace Sarah. "Sorry, I'm cutting it close. Court ran long yesterday and I nearly missed my flight." Sarah held her daughter close, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume, something sophisticated and understated, much like Emma herself. "You're right on time. We're just about to start." As they moved toward the conference room together, Emma updated Sarah on her latest case, a class-action lawsuit representing families displaced by a questionable urban renewal project in Brooklyn. Her passion for housing justice had evolved directly from her childhood experiences, transformed into a powerful advocacy that combined personal understanding with professional expertise. The strategic planning session progressed efficiently, with presentations on current programs, financial projections, and emerging needs in their service areas. Ryan joined via video conference from Mapleton, his familiar face projected on the large screen at the front of the room. Though thousands of miles separated them physically, his presence felt immediate and essential, their collaborative rhythm, undiminished by distance. When discussion turned to the newly announced endowment, the energy in the room shifted to excited possibilities. Board members proposed various applications for the expanded resources, preventative education programs, policy advocacy initiatives, research partnerships with universities, international collaborations. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Sarah interjected, "I think we should remember what's always guided us: direct impact on families in need. Whatever we build with these new resources should maintain that core focus." Emma nodded in agreement. The foundation's strength has always been its personal approach, People don't just receive services, they become part of a community. We can expand without losing that essential quality. The discussion continued through lunch, with working groups forming around specific strategic initiatives. As the afternoon session wrapped up, Sarah found herself standing with Emma by the large windows overlooking what had once been the mansion's formal gardens, now transformed into a community vegetable garden and play area for the children in transitional housing. "I've been thinking about something," Emma said, watching as a group of children harvested fall vegetables under a staff member's guidance. "This 15th anniversary feels like a natural transition point. The foundation is established, the programs are solid, and the new endowment ensures sustainability." Sarah sensed where the conversation was heading. "You're thinking it's time for a leadership transition?" Emma nodded. "You and Ryan have built something remarkable, but you shouldn't have to carry the operational weight forever. Melissa is more than ready to step up as CEO if you're willing to move to a more strategic role. And the team you've assembled is extraordinary. They can take the foundation forward while you and Ryan have more time for yourselves." The suggestion wasn't entirely unexpected. Sarah and Ryan had begun preliminary discussions about their future roles, recognizing that at 51 and 55, respectively, they had potentially decades of active life ahead, but might want to reshape their professional commitments. "We've actually been talking about something similar," Sarah admitted. "Not stepping away entirely, but evolving our involvement. The Portland-Mapleton split has been working, but it's not ideal for us, personally in the long term." "You miss Dad," Emma stated simply. Sarah smiled. "We've made it work because the foundation needed us in different locations, but yes, I miss the everyday moments. Video calls aren't the same as morning coffee together." Emma leaned against the window frame. "So what are you thinking?" "A new role, more advisory and less operational." "Something like that," Sarah confirmed. "Board Chair Emeritus has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Supporting special initiatives, mentoring new leadership, but without the day-to-day responsibilities." Before Emma could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming video call. The screen displayed Olivia's face, her 13-year-old features animated with excitement. "Did Mom tell you yet?" Olivia demanded as soon as the connection was established. Emma looked questioningly at Sarah, who shrugged with a smile. "Tell me what, Squirt?" "I got accepted to the National Youth Ballet." "Summer intensive," Olivia announced, practically bouncing out of frame. "The youngest in my division. Dad's taking me out for ice cream to celebrate." The camera shifted to reveal Ryan, grinning proudly beside their youngest. "We thought you'd want to hear the news right away. Your sister's following in your overachiever footsteps, counselor." Emma laughed. "That's fantastic, Liv. I knew you'd get in. Those judges would have to be blind to pass you up." The family chatted for a few minutes, with Olivia detailing the audition process and Ryan providing proud, fatherly commentary. As they signed off with promises to continue the conversation during the weekly family video call, Emma turned back to Sarah. "It's nice to see Dad so enthusiastic about ballet. Remember how confused he was when Liv first started dancing?" Sarah smiled at the memory. Ryan, who had raised Dylan around construction sites and outdoor activities, had been endearingly bewildered by Olivia's passion for dance, learning ballet terminology with the same determined focus he applied to building codes. "He's come a long way," Sarah agreed. "So have we all." As the strategic planning retreat continued into its second day, the concept of leadership transition became a formal agenda item. Melissa Chen expressed willingness to step into the CEO role, with a 2-year transition period during which Sarah would gradually shift to her emeritus position. Ryan would similarly transition to an advisory role focused on construction and housing design innovation, leveraging Dylan's emerging expertise in modular systems. By the retreat's conclusion, a clear path forward had emerged, one that honored the Foundation's origins while embracing its evolution. The announcement would coincide with the 15th anniversary celebration, providing a natural moment to recognize past accomplishments while introducing the next chapter. On the final evening, as board members departed for their respective homes, Sarah remained in her office, reflecting on the decisions made and the journey ahead. A gentle knock at the door revealed Emma, changed now from her professional attire into jeans and a sweater, looking more like the daughter Sarah remembered from family game nights than the polished attorney who had commanded the board's attention. "Everything okay, Mum?" Emma asked, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. Sarah nodded. "Just processing. It's the right time for this transition, but it's still a big change." "You're not stepping away from the mission," Emma reminded her. "Just changing how you contribute to it and gaining something valuable in return. Time with Dad, with us, maybe even for yourself." Sarah smiled at her daughter's perceptiveness. "When did you get so wise?" "I had good teachers," Emma replied, echoing words she had spoken years earlier. She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about Michael a lot lately. My first dad. As I've gotten older, I've gained more perspective on what he did, standing up against Blackwood, even knowing the risks." Sarah's expression softened at the mention of Michael. Though Ryan had been the father who raised Emma through her formative years, they had always honored Michael's memory and his place in the family narrative. "He would be so proud of the woman you've become," Sarah said. "Of all of you." Emma nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. "I think about the choices he made, choosing integrity over security, truth over self-preservation. Those values shaped who I am, even though I lost him so young. And then Ryan came into our lives, showing us a different kind of courage, the everyday kind that opens doors to strangers and builds something lasting, one day at a time." The observation was profound in its simplicity. Two fathers, one whose principled stand had cost him his life but exposed corruption, and one whose simple act of kindness had created a new beginning for a family in crisis. Different paths, different choices, but connected by the impact they had on the lives around them. "I've been incredibly fortunate," Sarah acknowledged, "to have had both of them in my life in different ways, and to see how those influences have shaped you and your brothers and sister." Emma smiled. "And now the Foundation is entering its next phase too. Everything evolves, doesn't it? But the core remains." As they prepared to leave for the dinner, Sarah took a final look around the office, at the family photos, the Foundation achievements, the visible reminders of the journey from that snowy bus stop to this moment of transition and possibility. The path had not been straight or easy, with personal challenges and professional setbacks interspersed among the triumphs. But through it all, the Foundation had remained true to its origins, transforming adversity into opportunity, one family at a time. Later that night, after a celebratory dinner with the remaining board members, Sarah stood on the mansion's terrace, gazing at the Portland skyline, glittering against the night sky. Ryan's voice came through her phone, the familiar low rumble that still warmed her heart after all these years. "So it's decided?" he asked. "The transition plan is a go?" "It is," Sarah confirmed. 2 years from now we'll be officially semi-retired. Though knowing us, we'll probably still be involved in a dozen projects." Ryan's chuckle resonated through the connection. "Wouldn't have it any other way, but it'll be nice to be based in the same place again, to have breakfast together every morning instead of just during visits." "I was thinking," Sarah said, watching, as a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the dark canvas above. "Maybe we should take a trip when this transition is complete. Just the two of us, somewhere we've never been." "What did you have in mind?" Sarah smiled into the darkness. "Remember that list we made on our 5th anniversary? All the places we thought we might visit someday when the kids were older and the foundation was established. I think it's time to dust that off and start checking off some destinations. I'd like that, Ryan said softly. Though I have to admit, the place I'm most looking forward to is wherever you are. The simple truth of his statement encompassed their entire journey together, from strangers meeting in a moment of crisis to partners in both life and purpose. Through all the changes, challenges, and triumphs, they had remained each other's constant, their connection deepening with each passing year. As Sarah ended the call with promises to fly home to Mapleton in 2 days, she took one last look at the night sky, at the vast expanse of stars visible now that she had stepped away from the city's immediate glow. Somewhere among those countless points of light were the futures of the thousands of families the foundation had helped. Children who would grow up with stability and opportunity, parents who had found not just housing but hope, communities, strengthened by the ripple effects of rebuilt lives. And somewhere among those stars was the legacy of a chance encounter on a snowy evening, when a struggling single father had stopped to help a family in need, never imagining how that simple act would transform not just their lives, but countless others across the nation. It was a reminder that the most profound changes often begin not with grand gestures, but with small moments of human connection. A door opened, a hand extended, a choice made to see humanity in a stranger's eyes. As Sarah turned to go inside, she carried that knowledge with her like a talisman, the certainty that whatever the future held, the foundation they had built, both literally and figuratively, would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives in ways they might never fully know, but could always trust would matter. 20 years had passed since that snowy evening at the bus stop. The Michael Jackson Memorial Foundation had grown from a local initiative into an international organization with programs on 3 continents. What had begun as one family's journey through hardship had evolved into a movement that had transformed thousands of lives. On a perfect summer evening, the farmhouse in Mapleton buzzed with activity as the extended Jackson Miller family gathered for a special celebration. The occasion was twofold: Sarah and Ryan's 20th wedding anniversary and their official retirement from day-to-day foundation operations. After the 2-year transition period, they had finally stepped into their emeritus roles, passing leadership to the capable team they had built. The farmhouse property had changed over the decades, expanding to accommodate family gatherings while maintaining its warm, welcoming character. The barn-turned-workshop had been joined by a guest house where visiting family members stayed during reunions. The gardens had flourished under Sarah's care, now featuring winding paths through native plantings and a small orchard that produced abundant fruit each fall. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, casting golden light across the property, family members and close friends assembled on the spacious back lawn. Tables draped in white linens formed a large rectangle, creating an intimate setting despite the significant number of guests. At 56, Sarah's dark hair had turned completely silver, worn in a sleek bob that framed her face. The worry lines that had once marked her expression had softened into the gentler creases of laughter and wisdom. Ryan, at 60, remained robust despite streaks of grey at his temples, his hands still strong from years of building and creating. Emma, now 30, had recently been named partner at her law firm, specializing in housing rights and community development. She sat beside her husband, Michael, named not coincidentally after her first father, a pediatrician whose gentle manner with children reminded Sarah of qualities in both the fathers who had shaped Emma's life. Dylan and Liam, 28, had followed different professional paths but maintained the close bond forged in childhood. Dylan had established an innovative engineering firm focused on sustainable housing solutions, while Liam's music compositions for social justice documentaries had earned him industry recognition, including an Emmy nomination the previous year. 18-year-old Olivia, preparing to begin her studies at Juilliard's dance program in the fall, moved gracefully among the guests, her inherited social ease making everyone feel welcome. Though she had no memories of the family's earliest struggles, she had grown up immersed in the Foundation's mission, developing a deep appreciation for her family's unique journey. The extended family circle had grown to include not just spouses, but the next generation. Emma's twin girls, now 4 years old, chased fireflies at the edge of the gathering while Dylan's infant son slept peacefully in his grandmother's arms. Life had come full circle in the most beautiful way. As twilight deepened, Ryan stood to offer a toast, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. 20 years ago, Sarah and I stood under an arch not far from where we're gathered now, and a promise to build a life together, he began, his gaze finding his wife across the table. What we couldn't have known then was how many lives would become intertwined with ours, how many stories would become part of our story. He gestured to the diverse gathering, Foundation staff who had become like family, neighbors who had supported them through every transition, friends made along the journey. When I stopped my truck that night, I was just trying to help someone get out of the cold. I had no idea I was meeting the people who would complete our family, who would help create something that would touch thousands of lives. Sarah's eyes shimmered with emotion as she raised her glass in response. To chance encounters that change everything, she said, and to the courage it takes to open doors, both literal and figurative. As glasses clinked and conversations flowed, Harold Winters, now in his 90s but still sharp-minded, approached Sarah. His walking had slowed with age, but his eyes retained their keen intelligence. "I have something for you," he said, passing her a small package. "It arrived at the Foundation office last week, addressed to you personally. Given the sender, I thought it best to deliver it myself." Sarah unwrapped the package to find a small wooden box with intricate carvings. Inside lay a pocket watch with the Blackwood family crest, accompanied by a brief note. "Found among my father's personal effects." The inscription suggests it belonged to Michael's biological grandfather. It should be with his children, Jennifer. Blackwood Sarah ran her thumb over the watch's worn case, then opened it to reveal an inscription, "To paths not taken, but perhaps still possible." It was the message from Eleanor Blackwood to her lost love, Michael's biological grandfather, resonated across the decades, a reminder that while some journeys are interrupted, their essence can continue through new beginnings and unexpected connections. "A fitting circle," Harold observed. "The foundation you built has allowed countless families to find new paths when their original ones were blocked." Sarah nodded, closing the watch carefully. Later, she would share it with Emma and Liam, another piece of their complex heritage, to incorporate into their understanding of themselves. Their family story had never been simple, but its complications had ultimately enriched rather than diminished them. As evening deepened into night, lights strung between trees illuminated the gathering. Liam had assembled a small ensemble of musician friends who played softly as couples, danced on the makeshift floor of wooden panels Ryan had constructed for the occasion. Ryan found Sarah standing at the property's edge, looking out over the valley. Below, the watch still in her hand. "Everything okay?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She nodded, leaning into his familiar warmth. "Just thinking about journeys. How rarely they follow the paths we expect." Ryan smiled, understanding as he always did. "Would you have chosen a different path if you'd known where this one would lead? All the challenges along with the joys." Sarah considered the question, her gaze taking in the gathering. Their children, Laughing together, grandchildren being passed from loving arms to loving arms, friends who had become family, enjoying the celebration they had created together. "Not a single step," she said with certainty. "Every difficulty led us here. Every challenge made this possible." She turned in his arms to face him directly. "Remember when you asked me that night in Portland what happened next, after everything changed, and I said I'd been so focused on survival that I couldn't imagine having choices?" Ryan nodded. The conversation had stayed with him over the years, a marker of their transition from crisis to possibility. "I never could have imagined this," Sarah continued, gesturing to the life they had built together. "Not just the foundation or the work we've done, but this family. The one we created together from pieces that didn't initially seem to fit, but turned out to be exactly what we all needed." From the dance floor, Olivia called to them, "Mom, Dad, they're playing your song." The melody that had accompanied their first dance as husband and wife drifted through the evening air. Ryan extended his hand with a slight bow. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Jackson Miller?" Sarah slipped the watch into her pocket and placed her hand in his, the gesture as natural as breathing after 20 years together. As they moved among their family and friends, the steps familiar and comfortable, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate widow at a bus stop to the architect of an organization that had changed thousands of lives. From a struggling single father to the cornerstone of a blended family that had flourished beyond all expectations. From strangers meeting in a moment of crisis to partners who had built something lasting and meaningful together. As the music swelled and Ryan drew her closer, Sarah caught Emma's eye across the dance floor. Her eldest daughter was watching them with an expression of contentment, her own husband cradling one of their twins against his shoulder. In that exchanged glance was a shared understanding of how far they had come, of losses transformed into new beginnings, of hardship alchemized into purpose. The inheritance that had once seemed like an ending, the conclusion to a chapter marked by struggle and uncertainty, had instead become the beginning of a much larger story. Not because of the wealth itself, but because of how they had chosen to use it, how they had allowed it to amplify rather than replace the values that had guided them through their darkest days. As the stars emerged overhead and the celebration continued around them, Sarah and Ryan danced slowly in the center of the family they had built, not just their children and grandchildren, but the extended circle of lives touched and transformed through their foundation, their work, their example. It had begun with a simple choice on a snowy evening: to stop, to see, to help. Everything that followed, the revelations, the inheritance, the foundation, the family, had grown from that moment of connection. A reminder that the most profound journeys often begin not with grand ambitions, but with small acts of human kindness. That true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we build together. And that sometimes the most unexpected path leads exactly where we need to go. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.